Hello and welcome. In addition to the many films which have been inspired over the years in order to act as guideposts by providing needed information to the higher consciousness of those in the audiences who would see them, many very worthwhile books have also been written over the years. In the upcoming book lists, given in a later video, we will provide the titles of a number of those books which we believe will be especially helpful to the seeker. At this time, however, it's my purpose to call to your attention one book title, which I believe will provide unusually helpful information because of the nature of the rather straightforward story that it tells. This book, The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, tells a beautiful story. It tells of a man who was willing, if necessary, to give up everything and everyone, even those he loved dearly, in order to follow and serve God. This is a true seeker. Believe me when I tell you that there are exceedingly few in the world today, even among those who consider themselves to be very devout, who would be willing to give up their friends, their jobs, or even their families if necessary, to be able to follow the path that God offers them and to live a life of service as an instrument of God's will. It may never be needed that you give up all that the character in this particular book relinquished. It may not even be needed that you give up anything. Be assured, however, that if you are a serious seeker who wants to serve, then eventually in this life or a future one chosen by your higher self, it will be needed that you are at least willing, deep in your heart, to make sacrifices, perhaps even to give it all up in order to serve. I'm reminded here of the words of a poem titled December 25th, included in the video on poetry. This poem describes in part the literal way in which the Master Jesus gave up his life to set an example of what we must be willing to do to one degree or another, although not as literally as he did. Here are two verses from that poem that will help to give you the idea of what I'm saying. He truly gave up life that day to show us all that we should give our lives up too for God, though not so literally. To serve and worship him each day in one way or another. To see each woman and each man as sister and as brother. Don't be alarmed at these things that you're learning. It's not required that a person wake up some morning and dramatically and drastically change their whole life. Such changes are always made by personal choice, and they usually happen gradually over a period of many years, decades, or even lifetimes. No person is ever required or even asked to give more than they are able. Excuse me. Be assured, therefore, that God would never tell you that you must do such a thing. Remember that we are all agents of free will. In fact, God has set up the law that states, as you sow, so shall you reap. Excuse me. And other than that, unless one requests such, there is no interference by God in our individual lives. Much of our future destiny, note that the word is destiny and not fate. That which we will reap tomorrow is determined by what we think, say, and do. In other words, what we sow today. It is not the devil that brings us undeserved punishment, or God who gives us undeserved rewards. In almost every instance, because of the law set up by God, again, as you sow, so shall you reap. These things come to us as a result of decisions made by us and our own higher self, which really means as a result of the decisions that we at that higher level make. All of this in order to help us, because we at a conscious level have made a decision are decisions that were not as wise as they could have been. The higher self therefore knows that we need to learn some of the specific lessons of this life, lessons that are associated with those unwise decisions. These sometimes difficult lessons the higher self knows that we need in order to help us to make a wiser decision at some future time when we might be faced with the same or a similar situation. This is the reason we choose to come here, incarnation after incarnation, until we have mastered, meaning until we've learned properly, all the needed lessons that this life has to offer. We can then go on to higher things. If there are instances when lessons need to be learned because of our negative acts, thoughts, etc. from the past, then God may allow Satan or other negative forces as his agents to act as his, meaning God's, agents to deliver the negative karmic lesson. But this happens only with God's permission or with the permission of the higher positive forces who also act as God's agents, but for positive ends. It only happens at a time and in a manner often decided upon by the higher self. The same is true for many of the tests and trials that some, those who give their lives to God, must endure along the way, as did the hero of this book, Pilgrim's Progress. In the end, however, the reward is truly great. These sacrifices, tests, and trials are much of the substance of what the hero of the book experiences and endures in this wonderful story, The Pilgrim's Progress. Although the story was written by John Bunyan many hundreds of years ago, the principles involved are timeless, and the story is one from which we can all derive great benefit. In addition, if you're fortunate enough to read an edition that includes Part 2, then you will have the opportunity to experience the warm glow that comes when you find that some of those who did not at first see the wisdom of his decision to leave his home and family have now followed him to the final reward, as his wife and children arrive and join him there. Their arrival at that final beautiful destination, like his, is symbolic of the attainment of Christhood. This book is highly recommended to the seeker. In addition to books, films, and other such sources that seekers have used as guideposts over the years to help them along the way, there are also certain somewhat structured disciplines that have been established through time as means of teaching ancient truths to those who are sufficiently interested and prepared to receive them. We'll discuss here 3 such disciplines: alchemy, the Kabbalah, and the Tarot, or Tarot, depending on how you pronounce it. Alchemy is generally considered to be the act or process of changing a base metal, such as lead, into gold. Excuse me. Reference books, if they mention alchemy at all, usually associated with individuals who had what was considered to be a ridiculous notion that it was possible to turn lead into gold. It's sometimes further inferred that they did eccentric experiments with chemicals and metals, and that their writings, at best, were incomprehensibly vague and seemed to be even less sensible than their ideas about being able to turn lead into gold. Actually, though, some of their writings gave very detailed instructions about the alchemical process. These writings, however, were intentionally veiled. It was only after years of great dedication, study, and work that a few, and I mean a very few persons, could finally, only with the help of divine inspiration, begin to understand and follow those instructions to completion. Some people say that there really were alchemists who were allowed by the higher cosmic forces, at least once in their lives, to actually make gold by this process. The highest aspect of the alchemical process, however, has to do with much more than changing one metal into another. The alchemical process, and even the instructions to be followed for its successful completion, have a duality of meaning. The duality comes from the fact that in addition to alchemy being the means by which base metal could be changed into gold, it is also, in a higher form, a means of allowing the alchemist to change the base person, oneself, into so-called gold, a more highly evolved form of spirituality within oneself, in other words. The higher aspect of the duality is sometimes called spiritual alchemy as opposed to physical alchemy, and it more accurately defines what true alchemy is really all about, rather than involving only the turning of lead or another base metal into gold. The higher, or transcendental alchemy, as it is also called, is the process of a person spending many years, perhaps even a lifetime or more, working to raise the self to its highest possible spiritual potential for that incarnation. Many of those who practice physical alchemy also follow the parallel, yet higher path of transcendental or spiritual alchemy. Its completion is truly the work of many years, and for a number of dedicated alchemists it became the work of a lifetime or more. The Kabbalah, spelled Q-A-B-A-L-A-H or K-A-B-B-A-L-A-H as is often spelled, is another means by which ancient principles may be studied, meditated upon, and perhaps, to some degree, with guidance from a higher existence, even understood at a conscious level. The study of the Kabbalah is to be considered as a very serious approach to these principles. It looks at origins, and by that I mean that it looks at that, meaning God, from which it all has come, and that to which we all strive at one level of existence or another to return, meaning again God. Excuse me. One very important part of the study of the Kabbalah is a symbol that addresses many aspects of existence. It's known as the Tree of Life. You can see a pictorial rendering of the tree at the website humbleseeker.org, but first it would be worthwhile to find out just a bit more about it. The tree is normally depicted in pictorial form, as indicated previously. Above the tree there are often shown three emanations, for the lack of a better word, which are not included in that rendering I mentioned, because they're usually depicted as nothing more than three nested curved lines above Kether, the first sephirah, or circle at the top of the tree, with each having an arc at the top, and with each arc curving downward to the sides, just above Kether. They deal with the concept of limitless light coming from no thing, and even though they have not been depicted and will not be discussed further in this video, they haven't been depicted in the website or when they've been discussed further in this video, they have been described here because of their importance. Beginning with Kether, there are 10 Sephiroth, which indicate, among other things, the order of origin, following a zigzag motion from Kether to Hakma to Bina to Kesed, etc. The Tree of Life that has been depicted for you here in the website is traditional, with the Sephiroth beginning with Bina, representing the planets known to the creators of the Kabbalah at that time, and including the sun and moon. The tree has been taken in great part from color plate 9 of the book The 7 Rays of the QBL by Frater Albertus. There are 32 different paths that are a part of the tree. 10 paths are the 10 Sephiroth, and 22 of the paths are lines that connect the Sephiroth in various ways and are symbolically associated with the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. There is a more modern, and in this case more correct version of the Tree of Life that is also in the book The 7 Rays of the QBL by Frater Albertus. The more correct tree is shown on color plate 11 of that book. The more modern version of the tree includes Sephiroth for additional, more recently discovered planets. Be aware, however, that you will never see a fully complete and fully correct Tree of Life in print, because all knowledge of these things, this nature, has never been and will never be given to any single human person. Excuse me. I do not mean to imply here that a depiction of the Tree of Life constitutes the complete Kabbalah, for there is a great deal more in the study of the Kabbalah, including and especially in the writings of the Zohar and the Sefer Yetzirah. The information that is in those publications and others, although very important, is not needed for the purposes of our study in this video and has therefore not been included here at this time. There's also a good deal of additional symbolism connected with the Sephiroth of the traditional tree that has not been included with that which is depicted at the humbleseeker.org website, because it would be neither practical nor appropriate to include it there. These matters are not being considered here or depicted there for several reasons, the most important being that such a detailed study is not the focus of this video. Additionally, because of the great depth of study that such a consideration would entail, and finally because numerous books have already been written on these subjects, and the viewer who is interested may seek them out. It may be said here, however, that the tree consists of 3 columns, upon which are the 10 Sephiroth. When facing the tree, the rightmost column is known as the Pillar of Mercy. It is associated with the masculine aspects of the tree and is concerned with the future. It is considered to be positive in polarity. The leftmost column is known as the Pillar of Strength or Severity. It is associated with the feminine aspects of the tree and is concerned with the past. It is considered to be negative in polarity, but I want to state clearly that the term negative as used here has no association with anything derogatory, and instead has to do with polarity, as stated. The central column is the Pillar of Mildness. It is concerned with the present. By some it is known as the Mystic Path or Gold Pillar. Regarding the study of the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, you should be aware that they are considered to be very, very complex. I have heard it said that in one of the well-known faiths, they did not allow their teachers to begin studying the Kabbalah until they had served in the more normal capacity for as long as 30 years, in order to allow them to establish a stable, well-rooted foundation of knowledge and, in a manner of speaking, to prove themselves. And this is because of the complexity and the deeply spiritual nature of the Kabbalistic studies. It's not an area of study that one would recommend to the neophyte. Should you decide to undertake a serious study of the Kabbalah, it should be noted and remembered during your study that there are considered by some to be, generally, 2 approaches to the study of the Kabbalah. One would be the traditional Jewish study, which considers that the Messiah is yet to appear. And the other would be the study that considers that the person of the Messiah, the human person whose spirit is one with that of the universal Christ, has already come to this planet. Although there are aspects of both studies that many would consider to be the same, I have chosen the latter approach. As mentioned earlier, the main components of the Kabbalah consist generally of books called the Zohar and the Sefer Yetzirah, as well as the Tree of Life. The Tree of Life is simply a symbolical way of representing how creation happened, its basic order, etc., as well as representing positive and negative polarity, the 2 aspects of existence that form the basic foundation from which the material universe is created. There are other books that you might find helpful if you're truly interested in studying the Kabbalah. I will mention 2 shortly, along with additional information. But if I may, I would suggest beginning at the top of the book list, in that video book list, and slowly working your way through those books first. If you do not remember anything else from this video, please remember to take your time. The spirit entities that watch over you, meaning your guides and your own higher self, observe carefully your approach and attitude and will help you go forward when they know you are ready. If you watch this video carefully more than once, you're likely to find many answers here, especially as you progress in understanding that you may have missed the first time through. As mentioned earlier, if you truly feel that you need to do more reading or study of the Kabbalah, there are a number of good books for that purpose. Remember, however, that a study of this type is not recommended to the neophyte. 2 of those books are Concepts of Kabbalah by William G. Gray and The Mystical Kabbalah by Dion, D-I-O-N, Fortune. I recommend reading judiciously once you do make the decision to read or study further on the Kabbalah. Be aware that some of the most important representations made by the tree, in the opinion of this speaker, are as follows. Kether represents the God of all that exists, which is another way of saying that Kether represents God as the totality of the Trinity, that is, being at the same time the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, while Chokmah represents God the Father. Many would probably disagree with that representation of the first two Sephirah, and who's to say that they would be wrong? Binah represents God the Holy Spirit, and Tifereth, God the Son, the universal Christ. A Sephirah is one of the circles on the tree. Representation of those planets that were known at the time of the beginning of these studies, when the design of the tree was created by man, or inspired perhaps by God, were included. The more modern and more correct tree mentioned earlier takes into account planets from more recent knowledge. If you watch carefully, you will find that all these symbols being used were included in order to help teach certain very important truths. This study, as well as some of the other disciplines that teach these truths, are shown together in the website humbleseeker.org as tables of correspondences. Because of the fact that there are simply different ways of representing these same truths, one symbol may equate to another. Perhaps it would be wise at this point to issue a word of caution regarding the study of the Kabbalah. There are those who are so concerned about having things the way they want them that they attempt to make use of principles that some might call Kabbalistic magic. The use of magic in general, whether it is white or black, in order to have a certain outcome based on what the perpetrator of the magic wants to have happen, is strongly discouraged by me, by this speaker, myself, as a practice. Let this again be a word to the wise, if the wise will but heed it. The Tree of Life, like the rest of the Kabbalah and like other paths of study, is intended to impress upon the consciousness of those who study it truths about existence, about life, about themselves, and about creation and the Creator. Like the tree, rooted in Malkuth, which represents the earth, with its branches reaching into the heavens, we all have a similar duality, with our feet grounded on earth in the physical world, and our spirit reaching for the heavens, or the higher realms. There are a number of additional things that could be said about each Sephirah and each path, but enough has been presented at the humbleseeker.org website to give you a general idea of the appearance of the tree, even considering the fact that the drawing shown is not the perfect ideal that one might prefer. The tree's been represented there, however, as much as is required for the purposes of this video, and after seeing the representation of the tree, you may want to consider reviewing some of the information mentioned earlier in this video regarding the 3 columns that are known as pillars of the tree. I thank you very much for watching. I invite you to continue watching the next and subsequent videos in this series. Again, thank you very much.